The next talk is Michael Medin, and he's talking about the NSClient++.
Yeah. Is it working? No. Great. I don't think anyone has actually worked today. Yeah. Better? Awesome. One thing that works. I would just like to say I will not be talking about NSClient. That's just what I tell the people to be able to come to the conference. I was planning to talk about NSClient, but it didn't really pan out. So I'll just do other stuff. But we'll get into that in a little bit. Normally, when I do these kind of presentation, I usually spend the first 15 minutes talking about myself. And the reason I do that is because if you're going to fill 45 minutes, if you can take the first 15 minutes and just copy them from last year, you're halfway there, right? And I'm not going to do that this year because I'm going to do something new if the click of the thing is working. Let's go with the other click of the thing. Oh, seriously. I mean, both of them cannot be working. Okay, well, let's see what happens. Anyway, as you can see, there's a huge Nagios sign up here. And it's not because I'm trying to say that Nagios has bought NSClient or anything like that. No such luck. And the other thing you're probably asking yourself is, what? Seriously? Are none of the clickety things working anymore? Oh, God. What is it with me? So maybe my computer is seriously broken. Right, so there is no Lego slides, right, which I always promise to do. And the reason why there is no Nagios Lego slide is if you Google Lego and Nagios, you end up with this, which I thought was kind of ironic, because I don't really see the correlation, to be honest, but apparently there is one. So the reason why I bring up Nagios is I want to take this opportunity to say I'm sorry to Nagios enterprises, Nagios community, and pretty much everyone in the Nagios world. And I really mean that, really sorry. And the reason is that when I was at their conference a couple of years back, I apparently, according to the boss on the street, said something along the lines of, I don't even like Nagios. And I think that might have started some bad blood between us. Because I sent in some proposals for the conference the year after, and I got some rejections back. And then I sent in some proposals for the year, or this year, and I got some rejections back. So I just want to say, in the event that Nagios somehow thinks that I don't like their product, I was kidding. It's not true. So what I'm really trying to say here is that I actually love Nagios, and I love it so much that I've created a slide with hearts on it. That's how much I love Nagios. And let's just review that again because it's an awesome animation. You know, it's beautiful. and that brings us to the other side, right? Because there is this other tool. And I figured, you know, maybe I can buy some leverage with the Nagios people by essentially, you know, doing a whole thing about Isinga when I go to the conference. But the interesting thing about this slide is that there is again no Legos. And the reason is if you Google Isinga and Legos, not only do you find Bernd, but also me, which apparently have some sort of affiliation with Isinga. I can do the Legos, yes, but not the Isinga match. But Google never lies, right? But when I was doing this Googling for sort of researching for my slides, I encountered this one as well, which was kind of ironic. Because if you Google Isinga and logo, you will find a lot of Nagios logos and a lot of Zabbix logos. And then a bit down, you will find some Isinga logos. But in essence, what I'm trying to say here is, you know, Isinga sucks. And it sucks really bad. And I have prepared about 15 minutes worth of slides, you know, essentially just dissing the Isinga monitoring tool, which I will happily run at the Nagios World Conference 2016. And I mean, it's everything from classics, like, you know, if you can't understand the code, you can always rewrite it to, you know, good artists copy and really bad artists just steal, and that kind of stuff. So it's essentially a 15-minute slide deck with, you know, how bad Isinga sucks. And I just, you know, if someone from Isinga is here listening, I was going to say, I'm kidding. So I actually, love Isinga as well. Yeah. So this brings us to the big thing this year, right? Because this is the 10th anniversary of the conference. And I figured since I don't have anything to present this year, I could at least, you know, do some copies of my slide from last year. So that's essentially what I'm going to do. Let's see if the clicker works. Seriously. So in essence, this is when it all started for me. As you can see, the slides matches the nice Nagios conference logo, because when this started, it was not actually OSMC, then it was NNK, which sounds a lot more German. OSMC sounds like an American conference, whereas NNK is more German. And as you can see, I tried to sort of go and say, you know, hey, I almost does this in German because I spelled Nuremberg with the weird U character thing, and not the way we spell it in the rest of the world. And my presentation was essentially, you know, trying to tell people, don't use CheckNT, use CheckNRP or something else, because NSClient is not designed for CheckNT, it's designed for CheckNT support. Incidentally, that is the byline for this year's topic as well, so it seems like no one listens to me. And here's the interesting bit, because this is the way you guys looked in 2008, and it looks quite much the same, actually. There are some differences, but pretty much the same. This brings us to the next year, and here we can see that the whole stuff up here started to happen, right? Because this is when the trademark war started between Nagios and the rest of the world. So in essence, everyone had to rebrand everything called Nagios, so then it was the open source monitoring conference on Nagios. But notice how the Nagios stuff is like, it's the central theme of the logo. I was talking about application monitoring, which is essentially last year's talk, but like the 7-year-ago version of it. So trying to tell people that monitoring CPU and disk is pointless, and monitoring metrics and application is much, much better. At the time, I was doing Java, so essentially this was a long talk about JMX. And these are you guys in 2009, so thank you for being here, and it's not the same guys actually, so it seems like a different crowd came to listen that year. Then we have 2010, and nothing much changed here except for the fact that Nagios is now slowly moving downwards in the logo and soon to disappear. So I'm guessing here they've sort of started to work the Zynga code somewhere, deep in a basement somewhere, and they're sort of on the way to moving away from it. But I did a talk about essentially nothing, or as someone said, a lot of vaporware. Now the interesting bit about this presentation is that it says here, what's coming 039. And whenever someone is using NSClient 039, I tell them it's 10 years old, please stop. But if you do the math, if it says what's coming 039, then it was probably out in 2011, which means that it's not even 4 years old. So maybe I should stop telling people that. And here we have you guys again. And here I've sort of moved room as well, so now I'm in this room, which I've been in since. 2011 was probably the most interesting year for me, and the reason was not just that Skyrim came out, but that I talked about Skyrim coming out in my monitoring presentation. Because essentially what I realized is that no one cares about monitoring anyway, so why talk about it? You can just talk about other random stuff and people will be, you know, just as happy. The talk I did was about distributed monitoring, and in essence, it was just, you know, NSClient, but with a different title. And apparently some weird dude was doing standing ovations. Yeah. I assume he's paid by NETWAYS to do that, but someone has to be that as well. And then we have 2012, which I want to apologize again for the horrible font. I seriously don't know what I was thinking. It's like completely unreadable, and some sort of like red down here, so it should look like, yeah, I wouldn't want to go there. But the interesting thing here is really that my slides have changed quite a lot, because the previous ones were like PowerPoint 101 with bullet points and a standard PowerPoint theme, whereas all of a sudden we had these full picture slides. And if there's anything I want you to take with you from this presentation, is that this is the way to do presentations, because people think what you're saying makes more sense if there's a big picture in the background, and they think you know what you're talking about, which I don't. But that's never stopped me. Now, the interesting bit here is this guy, because this is actually the very first Lego slide, and it's in 2012, so the whole Lego theme is not very old for me, actually. And in this case, I've stolen it, and then I did a lot of demos, which I'm going to do today as well, and this is probably what we'll see later on, because thus far, nothing has been going well for me. And this is how you guys looked in 2012, by the way. For some weird reason, the photo from 2012 is missing. Not sure if that is because I was wasted at the evening event, or if it is because I didn't take a picture. but alas, it's missing. So this brings us to where I think my presentation sort of came together, and I started to do the whole full-page slide and all that kind of stuff. And as you can see, there's no mention of Nagios anywhere in the logo. It's just OSMC, right? And I talked about, NSClient, what's new, essentially. I had two presentations. One is talking about metrics or doing application monitoring, and the other one is talking about NSClient. So every other year to sort of shift between them. And this is the way you guys looked. And 2014, which was last year, which was again when I did the rerun of my 2009 presentation, why we should monitor things. A lot of people sort of said, yeah, you had a lot of Lego slides. And this is actually not true, because there were just a handful of them. But those were the ones that people remembered, so that's the good thing. Now, the interesting thing about this presentation is actually this picture, because in the corner, there's a guy going like, oh, please go away from here. And then you have Chris sitting really grumpily looking. It's like, and then there's the Norwegian guy. It's like, what the fuck is he talking about? It's like, I don't get it. So apparently this was not a very good presentation. And for those of you who are wondering, and you've already seen these slides, I haven't forgotten about the Rockstar year 2013 when they had the limo for me and the Swedish flags. It was awesome. NETWAYS is the only company that will ever do something like this for me. Don't know why, but apparently they're very kind or insane. You might go either way. But in essence, what I've been trying to say here is thank you to Open Source Monitoring Conference. It has literally changed my life. It is the best conference in the world, both because I get to come here and talk about random shit, but also because it's actually a fun conference, and they actually do a lot of cool stuff. But the real thing, which I think we should be saying here, is thank you to the NETWAYS employees, because they are the ones to make this happen, and not Bernd and the guys who are standing there talking to you. It's the other guys with the black T-shirt and the NETWAYS logo. So what I think everyone should do here is once you get outside, go find the nearest NETWAYS guy or girl and give him a hug and say thank you from the bottom of my heart. That would be awesome. And with that, I would like to say I'm sorry again for essentially wasting 10 minutes of your time with nonsense. But that's what you get when you're the presenter. You're allowed to do anything. Then I would also like to say sorry to the guy or girl in room 505. Do we have anyone staying in 505 here, by the way? No? Because when I arrived at the hotel, I was staying in room 505, and there was no Wi-Fi reception, none whatsoever. So I went down to the desk and traded my room for someone else's. So there is a poor sod somewhere without Wi-Fi reception, just because of me, right? And since I am on this sort of I'm sorry track, I debated quite long whether or not to do this, but at the end of the day, I felt you had to do something, because a lot of, at least my the monitoring community comes out of France, and then there is some weird stuff going on there. But I usually sort of try to stay out of politics. And with that, I'm actually going to try to sort of do the presentation thing, which I should have started about 10, 15 minutes ago. This is sort of a truth with modification, as we say in Sweden, because first of all, I always want to say please don't be angry with me. And the reason is the same as always. These are essentially just copied slides from last year when I copied them from the year before and that kind of thing, right? So in essence, sometimes I'm busy. This is an open source project, and sometimes there's more time than others. But we do have sponsoring, and we do have donations, and we do have support. If you want to give me money for something that is normally free, I'm all for it. I like money. Unfortunately, not many people like giving me money, apart from the Norwegians. And unfortunately, there's only one Norwegian guy here, so it doesn't really pan out well. But as always, thank to my sponsors. Without them, and or NSClient would not be. And I know you're all thinking, stop stalling. And the reason I'm stalling, if you haven't noted, is because I wanted to do a really nice presentation about NSClient, and then I hadn't finished anything to talk about. So I had to sort of do that on the plane down here. I think the word we're looking for when we describe this, by the way, is CDD. That stands for Conference-Driven Development. And in essence, it looks a bit like this. So here we have the beginning of the year when you're like, yeah, I'm going to do a lot of cool stuff this year, and then life catches up with you. And then there's a bit of vacation when you actually have some time to do some of that cool stuff, and then life catches up with you, and then you're, oh shit, there's a conference soon. And then there's like, oh shit, there is really a conference coming. And unfortunately, we're still, at the peak here. So the commits for the stuff I'm going to demo, or the release, was actually done this morning. And that's just super awesome, because it never pans out, unfortunately. So the first thing, oh yeah, this was working right. The first thing we need to talk about is versions, because there is a whole bunch of versions of NSClient currently. And the main one is, of course, 0.4.3. And for those of you who are wondering, the 3 there is the major version number, so the 4 is just sort of an accident. And the reason why we are at the 4 and not still at 0.3.14 or something is because before I used to sort files by name, and if you go from 9 to 10, they don't sort by name anymore. So I had to sort of change the other number to get them to sort correctly. So that's why we're at 0.4. And 0.4.3 is, as I said, the latest version. Then we will get 0.4.4 in a couple of days. The plan was to get it out now, but unfortunately Wi-Fi doesn't work here. Well, it works a little bit better, but I can't upload. So when I get back, I'll probably push out 0.4.4. And then there is this 0.5.0, which is the mythical major next version thing, right? And this is actually what has been called 0.4.4 for quite some time. And all the stuff or much of the stuff I'm talking about today will be about 0.5.0, and that is, I would say, about 80% complete. So I hope it will be out this year. I just need to fix all the bugs. That's essentially what I've been doing, which was awesome because I had a workshop yesterday and I had like 13 people finding bugs for me. That's super awesome. Right, so installation is something that is a problem for a lot of people for some reason I haven't been able to discern. And installation in Windows is quite simple because you have an MSI, you double click on it and you do next, 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 and you're done, right? For some reason, Unix people, they don't like to click next, 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 next. They want to do complicated scripts, psexec, copying file, running weird commands, and that kind of stuff. And that's not the way to do it. The way to do it is to use the MSI. And we're going to go into a little bit about details about that. But in 0.4.4 and 0.5.0, there's something called tools. And tools are essentially a way to sort of seed a tool-specific configuration when you install NSClient. The only one currently is OP5. So if you're using OP5 monitoring and you install NSClient or NSClient++, it will allow you to click the OP5 button and all of a sudden it will look like an OP5 monitoring agent. And my hope is that other people who are involved with other monitoring tools will supply me with their preferred configuration and thus make it easier on user to use NSClient with whatever tool you're using. So the idea is to, once you fire up the installer, you'll be able to sort of select if it's Izinga or Nagios or OP5 or NetEye or whatever tool you're using, and everything will sort of be set up correctly. And since I'm using this on GitHub, the idea is that then the other people can do pull requests and change their own configuration quite easily, and I just sort of rebuild and push the new version. So hopefully this will pan out. The other new thing is something called conf includes, and these are parameters which you can set on command line when you're running the MSI or installing the MSI. And in this case, conf includes will allow you to include third-party files. So if you have your own configuration file for your corporation, you can just make sure that that file is at the other end when you install it. And then you can, in the MSI installer, tell, hey, NSClient, use this configuration file as well. Then we have something called conf set, and that's essentially for setting random configuration keys. And this is probably not the way to go if you want to tailor your own custom configuration, because you will end up with a very, very, very long command line, and that's never a good thing, especially not in Windows, since they have limitations on command line length. But if you want to sort of tweak the odd value here and there, this is definitely the way to go. So in essence, what I'm trying to say is, if this is not the way you're installing NSClient++, you're doing it wrong. And there is a whole bunch of these commands which you can put on the command line and customize how NSClient++ is being installed. And as I said, this is the way to do it. All these weird scripts you have, with psexec and copying and all that kind of stuff, it's wrong. Don't do it that way. This brings us to the next important cornerstone, if you will, of NSClient, and that is queries. Queries are powerful, but they do have sensible defaults. and they look something along the lines of this. And the idea here is that a lot of the Nagios or Isinga or whatever scripts you're having tend to have like -v and -c and minus all this stuff. And if you go back to that configuration and you try to read it, you will have no idea what it's doing, because -v could be one thing in one script and another thing in another script. So the idea here is that these should be easy to read and easy to understand, so that once you see it, you'll say, okay, so we're checking if the load is about 80%. Right. I can sort of grab that without having to read the documentation. And it's the same everywhere. Right, so easy to read is the main sort of focus. Things like exe equals Chrome, or things like free is 25% or something like that. But the cool thing here is that if you can sort of stack these and make them infinitely complicated, and I had this example, I think, 2 years ago, where there's this guy who's written a filter that's like 5 pages long. And I'm not saying that's the way to go, but the cool thing here is that you can actually make complicated queries, and you can actually check whatever you want. The other thing about queries that you should know about is that there is a few more than check CPU. So if you're just using check CPU and check disk, again, you're doing it wrong. So look at the other queries that are there. They can do a lot of stuff for you and change or make your life simpler. And this brings us to a wonderful world of metrics. Metrics is essentially all the rave nowadays, so I figured I'd have to jump on the bandwagon and do it like everyone else. In essence, metrics is something that fetches data every X seconds. So you might think of them as the opposite of checks, because a lot of people, when they handle metrics with Nagios or something like that, what they do is they run a check, fetch performance data, pipe the performance data to some sort of graphing database or something like that, then they run a check on that. And then you're a bit like, why did it have to go through Nagios? So the idea here is that instead of doing all of these checks, we can just push the metrics to your data store, and you can graph them there, and you can check them in the data store, doing all complicated aggregates and all that kind of stuff, right? So this is, I think, another interesting aspect of metrics that currently there's 3 of them, but there will be more quite soon. A lot of the internals of NSClient++ will be exposed as metrics, so you will be able to see what NSClient++ is actually doing. So you can see, how many threads it's using and for what, and connections and errors and all that kind of stuff. So you will be able to sort of monitor NSClient++ quite deeply using these metrics. Right, so where can you send these metrics then? Well, Graphite is the obvious easy choice, and that's been available for quite some time, essentially for sending off performance data. But with metrics, you can just send the raw data as well. But we also support collectd, for those who are using that. And there is something planned for doing checks on these metrics. And then you're thinking, what? Wasn't the whole point of metrics to not do checks? Yes, but it would be kind of cool if you could do checks that were on disparate things. So you could do checks on, oh wait, sorry, I'm like 2 pictures ahead. So you could do checks on CPU and memory at the same time, which are currently impossible without some serious shoehorning or doing some scripts or something like that. So this is something that is planned, so it's not implemented, but some sort of easy way to do checks on all of these metrics which we have collected internally. The way metrics looks currently is something along the lines of this. You just have a key and a value, pretty much like it does in the Graphite world or in any other world, right? The other new thing in 0.4.3 as well as 0.4.4 and 0.5.0 is the web interface. In the next version, 0.5.0, it is actually much better. When I released the web interface last year, I said it was the awesomest thing ever, and I still think that. So when I spent, better part of the summer rewriting it to making it even more awesome, I thought like, wow, this is going to be awesome. And then some guy sent me, oh, I looked this review of a web interface and it sucks. I was like, yay, happy. But I think it's a bit on where you're coming from. I'm coming from a really crappy command line interface, and then a web interface is way better. But most people might be coming from something like Facebook or something that actually works. And then my interface is not way better. So I think, maybe I need to tone down the awesomeness of the web interface, but I still think it's awesome. And it's yeah, I like it. Some people don't. But I've fixed most of the stuff he complained about, actually. So it will be awesome soon. maybe. The other new thing in the web interface is something called templates. And templates might be a bad name, but it's sort of a way for a script or a module to provide its own web-based configuration interface. And we'll see this a bit in detail later on. But in essence, currently, when you're changing the configuration, you have this key value store with a hierarchical path structure. And that's not very intuitive. If you're going to set a value, you might want to have a list of options or something like that. And this is a way for scripts and for modules to provide that so that they will be easily to configure. The other thing, and this is also the yellow stuff is things I've added in the last few days. The green stuff is things that's there, and red stuff are things that I haven't added yet, but might do on the plane back. The other thing that's coming is check NSCP, which will be using the REST interface of the web UI to make checks. And I think this will make it easier to do firewalling and sort of set NSClient++ up in complicated network scenarios. This is an example of a template. So here, when we add the counter, we get a list of available counter, which makes it a lot easier to find out what your counter is called, at least sometimes. And this brings us to the demo, which, yeah, it's not so off time, actually. Oh, yeah, sorry, I actually have a few more slides before the demo. Is anyone here using Docker? No one is using Docker? Wow. That's the first time I've heard that one. I thought everyone was using Docker. I'm using Docker, and essentially what I'm trying to say here is that Docker really, really sucks. And I'm probably the only person in the world who feel that way, because everyone else seems to think that it's awesome. But in essence, what I'm trying to say is, I'm not kidding here. It sucks so bad that had there been a guy from Docker here, I might actually hit him. And the reason is I've spent countless of hours trying to get Docker to run on Windows, and then you run into this guy, and you're like, yay. Okay, so there's apparently something wrong. Thank you. And then you say, okay, let's just restart everything. So you delete all your virtual machines, you restart everything, and you run into this guy. And down here at the bottom, you get some sort of it's the line in the C++ where it's like not even an error message. It's like, what the fuck happened? I don't know. And this is what you get. And then you're thinking, okay, so what did you actually do before this? Because it was working before, and then you cover the lid on your laptop, put it in a bag, and then you go to work, you open it up, and then your network interface has somehow changed, and then you get this. So in essence, Docker on Windows, no, it's not possible. At least not for me. But hopefully someone else can tell me that is. Right, so demo time. And now we're gonna actually show you, let's see, duplicate is what we want, NSClient. And the first thing we're gonna do, if we go here, and here, is install NSClient. And I'm not going to type because that's just going to end up as a big accident. But now we're installing NSClient, and we're telling it that it can change the configuration. We're telling it to enable the web interface, and we're setting the password to hello, because that's a nice password. And we're just running this command. Unfortunately, MSI is asynchronous, so it is doing stuff in the background. Hopefully it will pan out. Let's just close this and this, and see if we have something running on our local host. Yes, we get this, by the way, because it's a self-signed certificate. So yes, it is not secure, or it's not private, or whatever they're thinking. And this is the way the web interface looks. And if you, for some reason, have forgotten the password, you can run this command to display it. If I can copy-paste correctly. No, apparently I can't. That's how we copy-paste. So if we go to our command line here, in this client folder, and we run this, it should hopefully say that the password is hello. Awesome. You can also change the password via the same command line. So if we do this, this, by the way, is a bug that it's red, so just ignore what I'm doing right now. Right, so. And here we have some metrics being collected, and as I say, they look like a tree, not very fancy. If we go to the CPU tab, this is how it looks, and here we have the CPU utilization. We have sort of like handles and processes and threads and that kind of stuff. If we go to the memory tab, we will see the memory utilization, and the reason why I'm using a lot of memory is because I have virtual machines running. Normally it's at 90% or something like that, because I have a lot of virtual machines running. And then we can see disk utilization, and this is again, is not how full the disk is. This is the I/O utilization of disk, or the read queue and that kind of stuff, right? So not very fancy, but I think it's a step up from the previous command line we had, which was essentially a black box with a lot of weird messages in it. Then we can go to the modules tab, and this takes a few seconds the first time because it needs to load all the modules to figure out what modules we have. And here we can essentially just load. So if we want to load event log, oh, sorry, that was already loaded. What else do we have? That was also loaded. Oh, wait, that's the backspace. I should have actually prepared a demo. Let's load check log file. We can just click this. This box at the beginning is that the module is loaded. That means that it is now inside NSClient and we can use it. The green box over here is that the module is enabled. This means that if I restart...
sorry, please, here?
Yes.
Can you make it a little bit bigger so that it's easier to read it from the
This is actually mobile enabled, so I can make it really big. And, and we have the hamburger menu. Let's leave it there somewhere. Is that readable? Yeah. So this green guy on this side means that it is enabled. This means that if I restart NSClient++, it will be available next time. So check log file, for instance, it's just loaded, so I can use it, but it's not enabled. If I want to enable this, I can click this guy. What happens now is that I've changed my configuration, and that pops up here. And then we can save the configuration. And if we don't want to save the configuration, we can say that it should always save the configuration. And then we can reload NSClient, and the module will now be saved and always there forever, right? Thus far, nothing spectacular. So let's see what we have else. I probably should have prepared. Yeah, let's go to the settings tab. This is where we have our key value stores of our settings. And as I said before, it's not very intuitive. If you go to this guy, you have a whole bunch of keys. You still get the description and you get the values and all that kind of stuff. The grayed out part, by the way, means I haven't changed these values. If I were to change this value to 0, then it will turn black and I'll see that it's been changed, right? And I can click here not to change something. Let's see what else. If we go to this tab, we can see which values we have changed. So the changed tab means that these are all the values in this section that have changed, touched in some way. We also have basic, which is the commonly set values, and advanced, which are the not so commonly set values. Allowed host, by the way, should not be here. That's a bug. Yeah, as I said, I built this morning. So there are a few loose edges currently. So this brings us to, for instance, counters, because as I said before, if you want to add a counter, you can go here and you can click the add new, and it will allow you to add all the keys, which is not very intuitive. What is new is these templates, and if we click the add new template, it will look like this. So here we can, for instance, call our template something. And if we start to type here, we will just get a list of all performance counters on this machine. Now, I'm not going to use that list, actually, because I'm going to show you something else. Because one problem with using performance counters is that they are localized. So if you're on a German machine, as you can see here, these guys are in Swedish, right? Or, well, maybe you can see if it had been slightly bigger. If we do like this, you will be able to see. And if you don't speak Swedish, that might be difficult for you to set up, right? And if you don't speak German, which I do, then it's difficult for me when I get here. So what you can use is use the English counter names, and they will also magically work because of new features in the performance data. The other thing we're going to do is click the instances thing and set the value. Yeah, let's do static as well. ORD means that we will be capturing the value over time and giving you an average. Here we're just grabbing the latest value because otherwise it won't fluctuate. Otherwise it'll be kind of static. And save this. Yeah, I think we don't go from the save dialog, so hopefully it's here anyway. And we've already saved the configuration because it's always save, and then we can just reload. And if God is willing, we will have, yes, new metrics, awesome. This wasn't working last night, by the way. So here we have our new network interface and their values, apparently not so much. So apparently it's not working. Service, restart, let's do that. Yeah, I brilliantly came to the idea on Monday that, or Sunday, that let's change the internal threading mechanisms, and that's going to pan out really well. It didn't, so there are some snags in that code. Now let's see if we have some new values for the network. Yes, so here we can see the value is updating. Now we talked about these values because currently we can see them in the web interface, and that's not very interesting. So something that might be slightly more interesting is if we go to, let's filter instead, it's quicker, the Graphite client, and then we can load that. And then we can go to the settings tab, and we will have our default machine, and we set at the local host, which in my case is a virtual machine, and then we save that. And does it actually say anything when I save it? No, maybe not. Okay, no, we've already saved them. So let's reload. And again, if things work out, we will be able to get some new metrics in here, hopefully. Yes, it is working out. Awesome. So here we can see the metrics we added. Sometimes I'm lucky if the mouse thing is working. Oh, sorry, I clicked the wrong one. So down here somewhere we will have this nice metric which we just added. Was it this one? Yeah. So this is kind of how metrics work, and it's quite easy to set them up. If you're using Collectd, it will work similarly. The only problem with Collectd is that it multicast, which is a pain to set up, especially if you're on localhost, which is why you're doing this with Graphite. So metrics, kind of easy to set up, works kind of okay. Templates are not available everywhere. They're just available when they make sense, by the way. If we go to a model like system, and queries, we have a list of all the queries it provides. All of these without underscore, by the way, are legacy, so you probably shouldn't be using them. They are for old people, and I don't mean retired people, I mean old people. If we go to something, for instance, like check CPU, we can run that query by clicking run, and we will get the performance data back. Now, the interesting bit here is that this is the simple defaults kicking in. There is no command lines, there's no options, there's no anything. It is just running check CPU. But if we want, we can, for instance, set the filter. Oh, sorry, it's not tab. The filter to none, and we will get the load for all core, or for each individual core in this list instead. So then you're wondering, okay, so how do I know what the command it is actually running? And then you can run something called show defaults. And if we run this, we will get the command it's actually running back. Oh, wait, sorry. I need to click enter. So here we can see that the default filter is core equals total, meaning that we just want to get the total CPU load and not the individual cores. But we can also see that the default warning level is 80%. And if I make this bigger again, here, default level is 80%, the critical is 90%, and so on and so forth. So that's, I think, kind of neat, and it makes it quite easy. If we go to the help tab, we can get a help. And this is not pretty, by the way. So the list of options we have is just a list. It's not like a prettily formatted list. I'll fix that someday. If we go to the documentation, which, by the way, actually exists, even though people seem to think it doesn't, and we go to CPU, click the check query, and see if we have filter. We get a slightly nicer looking list where we, oh, yeah, this was apparently not mobile enabled. And here we can see what kind of keywords we have available to us when we write our filters or something like that. Right, so that sort of brings us to the last part that I'm going to demo, and that is the console view. And the console view is kind of the replacement for the test client, which we had before. So here I can, for instance, type help, and I will get a list of commands I can run. I can run check CPU, and I will get check CPU metrics back. But I can also do things like load, check, or cause crashes, maybe. I don't know. No, I don't think that is installed. Let's do like this. Plugins, and see what we have. We can load NRPE client. And a lot of stuff like that. So this sort of replaces the test command line client. As we discovered yesterday, there are a couple of things that doesn't work there as expected, but those will hopefully be fixed in the near future. But the big difference between the web interface and running in test mode is that when you run in test mode, it automatically sets the log level. So if I were to go here and service stop. Oh, sorry, I can't spell. NSCP. And then run NSCP in test mode, it will just spew out logs at me. And you will not get that automatically in the web interface. You can, though, go and change the log level and reload, and then you will get it in the web interface. But there are still some things that are not magic in the web interface that might be on the command line. So, yes, I might also say that there is like help links here and stuff like that. So, yeah, kind of standard stuff. So hopefully it should be a bit easier to use NSClient. And now I'm going to sort of switch back to my presentation, because hopefully I'm out of time. I don't really know when I should be ending, but hopefully about now. Let's see this. No? No? Now the keyboard's not working. Seriously? Hello? Shift FM. Oh, there we are. And again, I would like to say I'm really, really sorry for not having a better presentation this year. As I said, I've been way too busy with other stuff. I'll promise you next year, more Lego slides and something that actually makes sense. Now you had more of a half-assed demo. And with that, I sort of want to say, you know, thank you for listening. But before that, I want to say, don't forget to thank NETWAYS, and don't forget the hug. I think they need a hug. So with that, thank you all for listening. And any questions? But there are no questions, so we can just skip that part. Didn't I steal a water bottle, by the way? Someone like stole it back from me. I don't know. As long as it's water in it. So, any questions? Seriously? No?
We've got 12 minutes left for questions.
Yeah, you see. He knows stuff.
No questions at this time?
It's like sad, guys. Sad. One question, you can ask me what time it is or something. I could totally do that. I need to take the picture as well for the 20th anniversary. You know, imagine that. I'll go through all the pictures for the past 20 years. It'll be like several hours worth of me just showing photographs from the presentation. Are you going to look happy at the picture, or just, you know, no, this was a disastrous presentation? Yeah, I sort of get the feeling. Any sort of like, yeah. Okay, I'll have to be good. Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael, for the presentation and for the hugs.